Welcome everybody to the how's it going? Medical level 2. I just want to make sure we're trying a new mic here. Let us know if there's any question, or if you can't hear us, please give us a little feedback. Let us know if you can hear us or not. Okay, so this is the chance for all you guys taking the medical level 2 class to ask any questions. Dave and I'll be here for the next hour going through as many of these questions as we can. As we go through your questions, if we don't answer your entire question, please just feel free to type it, follow up in the Q&A. We have a bunch of questions that were asked before the class started. We're going to try and do those first, and then we'll try and open up to other questions, okay? All right, so let me pull up our list of questions that we had beforehand. And they're right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this. We never have enough time, right? And by the way, after we're done, guys and gals, just feedback is always great. Just started doing these Q&As. If there's anything that could make this better, from video to audio to length of time, before registration, after it, all those types of things, please give us feedback. We're always looking for making these better. Okay, so medical level 2, here we go. So there are many SFMA breakdown testing. Do you normally select one that is appropriate? And this was from Michael Shin. Michael, because you're saying realistically it's hard for you to do them all. Okay, so here's the thing about the SFMA. So remember, when we talk about time, I feel like to do a full SFMA, you really need about 15 minutes. Now, if I say a new patient time, I think most of us have at least 15 minutes at a new patient time. I feel like it's worth the 15 minutes to go through and do the entire breakdown, because then it makes my treatment session so much faster and easier. And I'm like, as a medical practitioner, I have more treatment times in my calendar than I do new patient times. So if I can shorten my treatment times, I'm all in. Yeah. So I spend a little more time on the diagnostic. Now, with that said, I also like to repeat the SFMA every time I treat. So like, Dave, if I'm working on your shoulder, yeah, I want to go and check when you come in, how's the shoulder doing? Yeah. Now, I might just repeat the shoulder patterns, the breakout, because that's the key thing that we've been working on. I feel like they all need to be fast. So back to your question is, do I select one? I do the entire SFMA. I do the top tier on everybody for sure. I break out all the DNs, the green boxes. That's the most important. If I have time, I break out the painful boxes as well. Normally I do them all, but if I was rushed, I just do the green boxes. And then based on history, based on chief complaint, I think it should be obvious which is your biggest problem. I'm always looking for the big white elephant in the room, just like with swing characteristics. Same thing. Yep. Someone has all 12 swing characteristics, which one do you start with? I think it usually becomes very evident, all right, this person's problem is the extension breakout, and we'll focus on that. I'm totally cool with you picking the biggest problem and focusing on that in the session. I think they'll actually get better. If I have time, I'm going to knock out as many as I can. Yes. Okay. This one's from Brian. How do you best treat a pitching forward of the thoracic spine during the squat position? I see this in a ton of walking athletes. Well, we see it a lot. So anytime an athlete is pitching forward, actually, there's two ways to pitch forward. Let me show you this, and then maybe, Dave, I'll use you as my model here. But so if I'm looking at, let's assume the bar overhead with the hands overhead, you see a lot of pitching forward. Now that we've gone to arms down, deep squat with feet together, you'll still see some of this pitching forward as they go down, right? Pitching forward can be caused by either spine extension or shoulder flexion. In the SFMA, now we're really going to focus on that spine extension because of the arms down deep squat.
I actually do it because I have an impingement on the shoulder.
So again, lots of people do this. So I think your question is how do I treat this? So let me show you how I treat this. I think there's two ways. Let's see. So Dave, I'm going to have you lay on your back. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so one of the things that I don't think we talked a lot in the online class, this is something that we do in the level 3 medical class and we do in our advanced SFMA, is we talk a lot about respiration and breathing. I think the thorax extension can be limited from a couple things. Tissue, right? So fascial problems, especially in the oblique abdominal area. A lot of times these fascial restrictions make it difficult for them to extend. Rib cage. So I think there are rib cage and restrictions in rib cage can be a problem. And then of course the spine. So let me show you rib cage. So what I like to do is arms down. I like to check the pliability of the rib cage. If the rib cage is stuck like this, it's very difficult to open up the rib cage. So what I do is I do sideways gliding on the rib cage, back and forth. I'm just checking to see if it's springy. It should feel very easy for you to move your hands. It shouldn't feel like you're hitting a wall. Like that feels very springy on Dave. And then I check the diagonal patterns. If I check your ribcage pliability, it's like an accordion. Imagine I'm trying to move the accordion this way. So I check side gliding, I check diagonal gliding, I even check unilateral compression. If those are off, if that feels restricted and it feels really tight, I'm going to do a lot of stuff for the rib cage and breathing. My favorite way to go after the rib cage is on the sideline. So they face this way. If the rib cage is really restricted, you want to do some stuff to help try and break the rib cage and expand it, to compress it and expand it. The way I do that is I set up with my forearm right across the rib cage. I have let their arm just kind of hang over here. I put my body on the back of the rib cage, so I'm laying down on top of him. I have him take a big breath in. As he breathes out, I compress, and then I hold his rib cage down. I tell him to take a big breath in again, and I don't let his rib cage expand. Breathes out, and I compress more. This is for somebody who feels like they're stuck out, and I'm compressing the rib cage. If someone feels like they're compressed, and I'm trying to expand the rib cage, I do more of this. As he breathes in, I'm lifting up. As he breathes out, I hold him up. And as he breathes in again, I lift up. And I'm trying to grab right on the middle of the sternum, and I try and lift from the back and the front. So that's expanding the rib cage. I know that seems minor. You find major changes when we do that. Now, the second thing I want to show you, again, you can go after the fascia, oblique abdominals. I think, like I do active release, any ART or any Graston or ASIM, any type of soft tissue. Let me show you one little trick I do for spine extension. I'm going to go face down. So when the spine extension's off, obviously I'm going to go through and I'm going to check the joints. I'm going to manipulate any of the joints that I feel are restricted. I do either a P to A, where I push straight down, or I turn them over and I do an anterior just to kind of open up the spine. But I like to show you guys how we teach them to use the spine in extension, because a lot of times that motor pattern isn't there, and now we have to reteach that motor pattern. So like if I said, Dave, put your hands, so your thumbs are on the table, so you're going to do a press up. Good, so right there, and you're going to press up. Now, most people are just going to do it right from their lower back, and they're not going to extend their mid back. So the way I do this, go back down, or they'll use their neck. So you totally relax. I take my hand, I use this part of my hand, by my pinky, and let your shoulders relax down here. Good. I'm going to direct by putting pressure towards his head. I'm going to direct where he extends from. So I'm applying pressure forward, and I say, go ahead and extend from right above my hand. You feel that right there? And then I come back down. I move my hand up. I say, go ahead and extend from here. You feel that higher? Back down, and I say, a little bit higher. And then back down, a little bit higher. Now he can feel extending up high, and I say it all the way down. Now this time when you extend, I want you to start here, then go here, then go here, then go here. And he starts to learn. Good, keep going. Here, now keep going down. Come up, but feel your spine extending all the way down as you come. Good. That little progression, I call that the knife edge. I take that little knife edge, make them extend above my hand, gives them the feeling of what it feels like to extend from those different parts in the spine. And then when we do the exercises, I want them to take that feeling and use it in the exercises. So I know that was a lot, but basically this is a very big common problem when players or coaches send me somebody who's got a player who can't extend from the spine. I'm going rib cage first, make sure it can move. I'm going oblique abdominal fascial type of stuff. Then I'll go after the spine, and then I'll re-educate extension in the spine. Okay. And again, remember guys, as we go through these questions, if I go too fast, because I'm going to try and get to all these questions here in an hour, or I say something you don't know, just shoot me a little follow-up in the Q&A part. Okay. In the cervical extension patient, one that can't extend when they're standing or lying down, am I focusing on neck extensors for treatment? Okay, so I think you're asking me what causes cervical extension problems. So on the cervical extension, remember, we're gonna look to see if they can get their face to the sky within 10 degrees of parallel with the sky. If the spine can't do that, well then we're gonna go and we're gonna lay them on their back and we're gonna try it passively. So now remember, if I can do it, but they can't do it, I'm thinking more of a stability problem. So that would be a motor control, active muscle contraction type of problem. If they can't do it and I can't do it, now I'm thinking a mobility problem. Now, anytime we go to the mobility problem, we have a little, let's call it a diagnostic algorithm that we like to use, right? Literally what I do is I palpate. So I would, let's just show you again. Easier to show than talk. So slide this over. Yeah, I'm gonna be laying your back with your head over here. So literally what I would do here is, if we're going after spine extension, I'm gonna make sure Dave is completely off the table. Come a little farther off the table. Probably take the headpiece away. This table doesn't drop down any lower. Let me just see. There we go. Okay, you totally relax. I want you to come towards me this way just a little bit. Make sure their head's all the way off the table. And now from here, basically all we're going to do is we're going to repeat the pattern, but we're going to palpate. So I would take my hands broad base. I'm going to palpate across the back of his neck, rest his head on my leg. I even take my thumbs around the front of the neck so I can palpate the muscles in the front, and I say, go ahead and just extend your neck. And as he extends, if you get to the point where he can't extend any farther, you're palpating. Now go ahead and sit up for me for a second. And spread your legs on the table this way. Good, just stand tall. Imagine he's laying down. I'm palpating. I'm looking to see if it tightens up back here. He feels like I'm hitting a wall back here. I'm thinking that there's either something wrong with the joint, right, that's restricting him, or maybe even the contractile tissue back here, but it's usually joint if it's in the part that's shortening. If he feels more tightness in the front, like I feel my SCMs or something here in the front underneath my jaw tightening up, now I'm thinking more fascia, right? Okay, we come back over here. So on all of these, when somebody has a restriction, like let's use the elbow, if the elbow is restricted, I would palpate the front and the back of the joint, have them contract. If the concentric side, the part that's contracting, feels like it's blocked first, I'm thinking joint. Sometimes it's the contractile muscle, but a lot of times it's the joint. If I feel the elongating side stopping me from moving, I'm thinking tissue. So to answer your question, on a person with cervical extension, am I working on the neck extensors? Well, it depends. Are they felt in the front or the back? You palpate in the front of the neck or the back of the neck? In my opinion, on cervical extension, usually we have joint followed by tissue. So normally we clear some of the block in the back, and we just palpate. We palpate each of the vertebrae, figure out which ones aren't extending, work on the extension, and then a lot of times we'll get to the tissue in the front and work on the tissue. Okay, hope that makes sense. Okay, let's see. When doing networking events, do you have any suggestions on how to showcase the TPI approach to help draw interest? This is something maybe I think we do a lot of section promos and stuff, and I think the best one is when we do the screen body swing connection.
Totally. So I think a lot of times, especially at country clubs, if you go in there, there's a lot of people in pain. There's a lot of people with back issues, shoulder issues. The best thing to do is get a golf professional to kind of bring you in and offer a talk, like actually go, hey, did you realize
lower back pain?
Lower back pain. I love doing the stability mobility model, describing that to the customers, and then going, hey, maybe your low back is because of a dysfunctioning hip, and you just describe why that happens. I think those are home runs.
I think the easiest is just for them to feel it.
Yeah.
So like Dave said, get the golf professional, say you're going to do a night of lower back or shoulder or hip, whatever. You do lower back and you get in there and you say, listen, I think a lot of us have pain in our back, but the back's not usually the cause, it's the result. And a lot of this can directly impact your golf swing. So what I want to do tonight is I want to kind of highlight how potentially we evaluate to see if your body is causing the problem. So what I want to do is I want to show you 2 or 3 tests that we do. We have a battery of 16 tests that we do on all of our players, but I want to show you 2 or 3 that we can highlight that are pretty important for lower back, and then we can even talk about how it affects the golf swing. So you get them up and you say, okay, let me teach you the seated trunk rotation test, right? Or let me teach you the lower quarter rotation test, or let me teach you the deep squat. Pick a couple tests. Pelvic tilt's a good one. Deep squat's a good one. Pelvic rotation is a good one. I think those are some good ones. Have them do 2 or 3 tests. Look for the people that are struggling in the workshop. Grab them, bring them up front. Everybody's laughing, they're laughing together. And then show, with the golf professional, show how this not only affects the golf swing, but affects the body. Everybody in the room now wants to get their full body evaluated. So when you're done, you just say, hey, I really appreciate you spending 20 minutes with me, 45 minutes with me. This is what I do every day. If any of you are interested in getting your entire body evaluated, I'll be in the back of the room, answer any questions. I've got my cards back there. Or give a free assessment if you want. 2
key words are pain and power. A lot of people in pain and a lot of people want more power. So address those 2 things, and I think you can go anywhere.
Yep. Time spent doing manual therapy intervention versus corrective exercise. So from Matthew. So Matthew, you're asking how how much time do I spend actually treating versus exercise? I would tell you, depends on the problem. Again, that's right. So I always feel like if it's a mobility-based problem, you know, there are a dozen different reasons why you can have mobility problems. But if the mobility problem is more musculoskeletal, from a fascial problem, a joint problem, I'm going to do manual therapy first. And then that manual therapy makes the exercises more effective. So I always say, you know, mobility is like a brick wall. Exercises are like a hammer and chisel. Manual therapy is like a bulldozer. Sometimes you just need to knock it over. But as soon as I get the wall knocked over, I move into exercise because I want them to understand that they're part of the solution. They can't just come to see me. They got to do something, right? So I would say that initially, I'm doing more of the manual therapy. Farther on, I'm doing more exercise. From an actual time perspective, I would say the exercise is probably 3 times the length of the manual therapy. So if I spend 5 minutes doing manual, I might spend 15 minutes doing exercise. It just takes longer to do those. But that's probably a good ratio, 3 to 1. That just if you're asking me personally, okay, that's kind of what I do. Time, let's see, when do you check rolling? Is it only when you suspect someone has an SMCD, or is there another reason to check rolling? From Paul. Great question, Paul. So let's talk about the rolling patterns real quick. Rolling patterns are used to evaluate the severity of SMCD problems. So if somebody has a stability motor control problem and you want to know how severe the problem is, we use rolling to see if the one pattern is even a problem. So let me do an example. If you're at home and you've got your SFMA charts there in front of you, you should look at like the single leg stance breakout. So if you have someone in single leg stance breakout, let's say that they're okay with vestibular, you get down to the half kneeling test. In the half kneeling test, I call it the Weevil wobble test. Let's say they're unstable, they fall over. So from half kneeling, we go to quadruped. Now we check them in quadruped. Let's say quadruped is good. Okay, so basically what they're telling you is they can't do it kneeling. They can't do a 3 position. You get down to the 2 position. They can't do a 2 position either, the quadruped. We're going to say that if they can't do it kneeling, they can't do it quadruped, well, then they definitely have a hip stability SMCD problem. But is their hip okay in the 1 position? We're not sure. It's not part of the breakout. So literally what we do is we say at that point in time, before we just start working on quadruped, we'll say, why don't we go check to see if they're okay in the supine position? Let's go check rolling. If rolling is a problem, then their fundamental switch, their motor control switch is off. And we would start with correctives in the 1 position. If rolling's okay, well, then they're fine until they actually load the hip. So we would start with maybe a 2-1 exercise, start loading the hip in the quadruped position. So we use rolling to look at the severity of the SMCD. If you're not sure if someone has an SMCD, you can always go check rolling. If rolling's good, then I pretty much start most of my exercise progressions in the 2 position or 3 and move up. If rolling's bad, we start in the 1. So we never use rolling for somebody who has a mobility problem, right? These are motor control problems. So rolling is not, if you take someone with a mobility problem and do rolling, you can hurt them. They're going to compensate. They have to compensate. Okay? Good question. All right, Paul. What swing modifications would help a girl with extensor carpi ulnaris tendonitis? I reduce her volume of balls. Okay, so Charles, you again from Australia. So Charles, I think this is a common injury. So think about I'm assuming we're talking about the lead hand. You let me know if we're talking about something different. It can happen in both on the trail hand as well, but a lot of times that extensor carpi ulnaris tendonitis become a problem in golf because of obviously the ulnar and radial deviation that happens in the golf swing. So what I would do, number one, the biggest problem we see is kids with poor impact and hitting off of hard surfaces, right? Second thing I would look at is grip size and what their grip looks like. Right? And then weight of club could be a problem if this is kids. So let's talk a couple of things that maybe aren't so obvious. So sometimes
trail hand.
Trail hand. Okay, it's trail hand. Okay, so sometimes that's even easier, by the way. Okay, so sometimes potentially creating some type of issue when they're setting, but literally sometimes going from strong to weak or weak to strong just by changing where the thumb is in relationship on the grip can sometimes change the way that they put stress on the wrist. Mm-hmm. I think also, Dave, we see a lot of kids with it in the palm, yes, right? Making sure that it's more in the fingers tends to help this a little bit, right? So looking at where their hand is on the club, I think can help. So where the hand is rotated, where the thumb is, sometimes, like Dave said, the weight of the club is very important. If it's too heavy, that can create issues. But I always try and control impact. I feel like when they're taking huge divots or they're hitting impact pads or hitting concrete mats, it's that deceleration that creates that trauma. So, you know, in the meantime, if it's injured while it's healing, maybe hitting ball fatigue can sometimes help if all they've got is range mats, or making them just play on the turf, see if that helps.
I would look at, you know, if you have TrackMan available, I would look at angle of attack numbers, make sure that they're not too down on it, because you can shallow early and then stay flatter through the impact zone. And
then obviously the way they're releasing, if they're scooping and coming in through here, that obviously can put a lot of stress on that as well. But I think you're right on, Charles. You said reduce volume. Usually that's a volume problem. The last thing I'll say on that, on any wrist injury, and this could be huge, is how she's sleeping. So a lot of times people get these injuries, and you think about it, if I break your arm, I put a cast on there, in 4 weeks it's brand new, right? 4 to 6 weeks the bone will heal. But if every night you hit your hand, it'll still be broken in 4 to 6 weeks. A lot of times they'll sleep with their hands like this. You see these weird positions. I have this rule, I call it the hand nipple rule. I'm like, your hand's not allowed above your nipple at night, period. So if you're injured, you're gonna put your arm down or put your arm through your shirt, keep it down at night, and a lot of times it just gets better. Especially if she has pain in the morning, she wakes up, okay? All right, could you cover the top tier hierarchy for treatment through the SFMA? Okay, good question, Adam. So on the top tier, remember, here's how I like to think of the top tier. So the top tier is this. Imagine we're gold miners, okay? We found a treasure map, and we found that there's a mine here in San Diego that has a ton of gold. So Dave and I grab our shovels, we grab some dynamite, we go to that mine, and we find it. We're excited, we're about to get all this gold. We walk in, we see the entrance to the mine, we walk in, and all of a sudden, there's 7 tunnels. And now we're like, my God, this is gonna take us forever, right? There's 7 tunnels. So what does the top tier do? The top tier is, imagine if Dave had some gold mining scanning equipment that he scans the tunnels. And all of a sudden, magically, a traffic light appears out in front of each tunnel. If there's a red light on that traffic light, it means based on the scanning, there's no gold in there. If you go in there, you can find some gold, but it's probably fool's gold. It's not worth anything. If it's yellow on the traffic light, it means there might be some gold in there, but based on our scanning, there's a lot of cracks in the walls. And if you go in there and you start blowing things up or digging, the whole thing might collapse and kill you. And then there's the green lights. The green lights is we found lots of gold, and you can hit dynamite, you can shovel, pick whatever you want, go crazy. So from a hierarchy, there's no hierarchy on the top tier. There's hierarchies on the green lights. We're going after the DNs. Any of them that are DN are now the hierarchy, right? So once you get your top tier done, all the yellows and the reds, those go at the bottom. The green ones, the DNs, go to the top. If it's dysfunctional, non-painful, you can go in there and start digging around, and that's usually what the source of the cause of the problem. Now, if you have 7 green ones, maybe this is your question. Well, what if they're all green? Now, how do I do this? To me, I use patient history to get an idea. I also use the developmental, progression. So think about our neurological or neurodevelopmental pathway. The first thing that develops with kids is the head, right? And then the extremities, and then comes the spine, right? So that whole neurodevelopmental pathway. So this is why if they're all green, we would say you probably want to clear neck first, then the shoulder extremities, right? Then we go to flexion, extension, rotation, and then we go to the complex pattern, single leg stance and squat. That's kind of our hierarchy of how we teach you if they're all green. But if you only have 2 greens, let's say it's single leg stance and squat, we're going to start with single leg stance and squat. And that's how we do our hierarchy. Do you have any suggestions for clients with FAI where hip internal rotation is painful or limited in dominant leg? Absolutely. This is like a plague in the rotary sport world, right? Is this femoral acetabular impingement. And we have 2 types, cam lesions and pincer lesions, but basically it's this response to irritation in the hip joint, and the body responds by laying down bone, and now all of a sudden the range of motion is limited, and next thing you know, with all that laying down of bone, it causes a delamination of labrum, and now we've got a torn labrum, and now they need surgery. So FAI is a big problem. I would say there's a couple ways that we attack this. Number 1, if you remember in the SFMA, we retest one of the big changes we did here in January is we test all hip patterns with the stabilized pattern and the non-stabilized pattern. Like we used to have the stabilized favor. Now we have stabilized favor, stabilized active straight leg raise, and stabilized rotation. I feel like if the stabilized favor or any of the stabilized patterns improves, then you probably don't have FAI, but they do have FAI, but they have more of pelvic orientation FAI. In other words, the orientation of the pelvis is creating the limitations in the hip, not the hip itself. Kind of like we always say in the shoulder, you know, your shoulder range of motion is great, but if you change the position of your scapula, all of a sudden it knocks out your shoulder. The same is true in the pelvis. If they anterior tilt, it can reduce the range in the hip. Now they've got impingement. And we see this a lot where we go ahead and we reorient the pelvis. So we'll work more like a lower cross syndrome, and all of a sudden that FAI not only is not painful anymore, it's not even FAI, it was a pelvic orientation problem. So the first thing we do is we make sure we don't have a pelvic orientation problem. If it's a true FAI problem, well then the key on any hip joint problem, in my mind, and on most joint problems, is distraction. Yes. When I get all my students say it's distraction, distraction, distraction. Anything you can do to help distract that joint usually gives them release. So if gives them some relief. If you like, let's say if you're a physical therapist and you're into Mulligan, maybe a belt distraction, chiropractic, any type of distraction, MOBs, I feel like that's where I start going towards. There's a couple exercises I like to do, some of the fascial exercises where they'll sit and they'll try and distract their legs by themselves. So kind of like, you can see me here, but if I sit like this, and literally what they're going to do is they'll sit on the ground with their legs like this, right? I'm just doing a chair so you can see me here, and they'll distract, so they feel like they move their heel as far away from them as they can, just kind of distract the hip, and then work on windshield wiper as they're distracting. It seems weird. I can wrap a band around their foot, pull the band this way to help them distract. But a lot of times after doing distraction rotations like this, a lot of the FAI people will say, wow, that actually takes some stress off. And then last but not least on the FAI, we talk to golf swing, we want to minimize in range of motion. Yeah. So we don't want them to get to their barrier. So like if I've got, you said internal hip rotation is painful, let's say on their dominant leg. So let's say their right leg and backswing, and if that internal rotation is limited, let's talk about maybe some of the setup things.
Yeah, so I mean, the big key things there with setup, it's kind of tough to see from the feet. So that would be, setup changes would be really with, on the trail leg, I can always fan the foot by fanning the foot. Remember, you can get some rotation from the thigh as well. So fanning the foot, closing the stance, so getting them in a setup position where this might be square, dropping the foot back and fanning it open, it actually gives them that feeling of movement and they can turn more. And the other one, Greg, I do a lot is I just narrow the base of support. Yep. So maybe the good leg they're getting some rotation from, yep, as opposed from the bad leg.
Yes, those are three great little examples. Okay. There we go. Okay, using shoulder as an example, can you explain how healing can be fast? Missing physical factors or new approach? Christopher, let me just read that one more time, make sure I understand. Using shoulder as an example, can you explain how healing can be fast? I'm guessing what I think you mean here. You can always type in if I missed this wrong. But I think a lot of times in SFMA, we talk about the magic of the SFMA on how sometimes somebody can't do something and then that 2 minutes later, all of a sudden they can do it. I always say those are usually SMCDs, stability motor control dysfunctions. Usually it's a motor control, neurological control problem. And as soon as you fix the brain problem, all of a sudden the problem's gone because they really didn't have a physical problem. It was more of a brain problem. If there's actual tissue damage, obviously we need to go through the tissue healing phase, right? So that can take longer. A lot of mobility problems take a little bit of manual work and some tissue repair and some motor control on top of those. So I think you were talking about using shoulder as an example. Can you explain how healing can be fast? If somebody like, this is the, if you try this at home, you make a gun, right? You make a gun here and you externally rotate and see how far you can externally rotate. A lot of times people can externally rotate more. They just forgot how to do this properly, right? So if you try this at home, try and externally rotate as far as you can. See where you're pointing at. Now come back over here. Now instead of externally rotating, internally rotate. Now with that shoulder internally rotated, go ahead and flex the shoulder. Now keeping it internally rotated, go ahead and bring it down by your side. If now, right now, you're shooting somebody different, all of a sudden you've got more external rotation, bring it back. Now see if you can externally rotate more. If you can do it more right now, you're what I'm talking about. You have an SMCD. In other words, you have more range, your brain was just limiting you. those people tend to heal really quick because they put themselves in positions that are creating impingement. They're putting things, they're using the wrong tissue because they have a bad motor pattern or stability pattern. If we improve that stability pattern, that motor pattern, all of a sudden pain goes away. Okay, great. I think that's what you're asking. I could be way off there, Chris. Okay, how do you prioritize findings of the top tier and the breakouts? Is it always mobility or stability? Okay, this is kind of like we just talked about here. How do we prioritize top tier and the breakouts? So top tier, we prioritize based on the DNs,
yep.
right? So the green boxes are first, we go after those. And then we do it by a neurodevelopmental perspective from shoulder down to squat. In the breakout, how we prioritize, we always treat mobility over stability. So if somebody has a mobility problem, it's kind of even hard to evaluate stability because they can't move. Now, I think a lot of people argue this. I see people debating this online all the time going, well, I think stability is more important, mobility is more important. I think they're arguing, should I stretch or should I do strength training? That's not what we're talking about. We're saying mobility is more important. Now, there are 12 different causes, major causes of mobility. We have neurological causes, right? We've got mechanical causes, we've got chemical causes. And all of these causes can be improved by different methods. You can improve mobility by strength training. You can improve mobility by stretching if that's the problem, right? So I don't care if you use strength training or flexibility training. I just want to make sure that's their problem. And if they have mobility, you're fixing mobility first, then go after stability because you can't get true stability without mobility. Yeah. Okay. Looks like Chris, you had a follow-up. At the last level one, you said you used to think healing took a long time. Now you don't think that is your approach different? No. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of what I was getting at. So I used to believe when it gets a couple things. When it gets to exercise, I used to tell people, well, we're going to change your squat and it's going to take us, 4 months to do this. I just don't feel like I had the proper diagnostics before. Now that I actually diagnose properly, and now you have the ultimate tool, the SFMA. If we go through and make the diagnosis and you work on the problem and you have the solutions to fix those problems, they should notice a difference today, right? Now, again, if they tore their biceps, we need tissue healing, right? But that's not how most people are. Most people are doing something to create irritation or create restrictions that we can improve today. That's what I mean by that comment. Okay. What is the rationale for changing the overhead deep squat to the arms down deep squat? Okay, one of the big changes we did in the SFMA here for 2018 is we definitely changed some of our top tier. Let me go through a couple of those because I think those are important. For the cervical flexion, we follow the pattern with your eyes. A lot of people used to ask us, like, where should I look? We're making sure your eyes are following your pattern. Looking down when you do toe touch, looking up when you do extension, following the pattern with your eyes. We got support. A lot of people go to do toe touch and they're extending their neck. We're going to say follow your hands with your eyes. When it comes to the single leg stance, a lot of times on the single leg stance, we did this for a long time. Well, some people had hip flexion problems. I actually think it's even easier to see these single leg stance problems if we just bend the knee. So literally, it looks like this now. We're just going to say flex the knee. Everybody can do that. It kind of shows up some of the Trendelenburg patterns easier. That's a simple correction or modification. The biggest change was probably the overhead deep squat. So here's the thing. We wanted to show the, number one, basic fundamental movements and the progression from SFMA to FMS. Now remember, when we're done with the SFMA, our job is to get them back to the functional movement screen. We always tell everybody, when you do a functional movement screen, if there's a 0, if there's pain, go do the SFMA. Once we're done with the SFMA, we get into the FMS. So think about this now. Let's say SFMA. SFMA says, okay, can you do shoulder pattern 1? Can you do shoulder pattern 2? FMS says, can you do the 2 at the same time with the shoulder mobility? It's a more complex pattern. SFMA says, can you flex your spine? Can you extend your spine? FMS says, can you not flex and extend your spine and do a trunk stability push-up? So it's more maintaining that. SFMA says, can you stand on one leg? Can you do balance? FMS says, can you stand on one balance and go through a dynamic gait, a hurdle step, right? Taking it to the next level. The same thing is now true with the squat. SFMA says, okay, can you, with your arms down, show me full range of motion in your hips, your ankles, your knees, give me a full deep squat in the lower extremity, maintaining some basic core control. FMS says, can you do that and not rob from your upper body to do this? Prove me you're not doing that by raising your arms up in the air. So it shows the normal progression from SFMA to FMS now. SFMA says, can you rotate to the right? Can you rotate to the left? FMS says, can you not rotate in the rotary stability? So it's basically, there's this beautiful progression now from SFMA to FMS. If you're not familiar with the FMS, I would highly recommend that you go get the FMS screen. You can see that online. You can get the certification online at functionalmovement.com. I feel like those are going to be one of your biggest referral sources. You should at least know what our return play guidelines is. And it's not the top tier SFMA, it's the FMS. Okay. And how much time do you spend in your session doing manual versus correctives? I think I already talked about that. As a physical therapist, how do I best incorporate treating, training golfers into my daily practice while maintaining productivity? I'm laughing because you say maintain. Does that mean if you have a net in your office, you're going to just be, I'm going to catch you hitting balls? Yeah, okay. So I think the productivity shouldn't change, it should increase. First of all, nothing we're telling you should make you lose money or see less people. We think this is a way to attract those people to come to your office. Yeah. So we first and foremost is golfers like to be around golfers, right? People like to be in clubs and cliques and fraternities and sororities. So when you go to your office, first of all, make it look like an athlete place. Make it look like there's golf bags here, there's pictures of golfers, there's flags up, so they're like, hey, this is where people like me come. Yeah. Okay. So when I have, if I had 3,000 patients in Washington D.C. If they sprain their wrist, playing a video game, they still came to see me because I was their doc. So I treat them like a normal, but they're one of my golfing clients, but they realize that I treat everything. So you have your normal people. The golf world, I hate to say this, is we launched the SFMA in the TPI medical track. When we first developed the SFMA along with FMS, we developed this and we launched it to TPI as our case, just to see, let's perfect it here. Then we realized that, hey, I wouldn't do this any different for just normal people. We should just do SFMA for everybody. So from a diagnostic standpoint, from a medical, if they have injuries, if you're a secretary, if you're a lawyer, or if you're on the PGA Tour, the SFMA doesn't change, right? So I'm doing the same thing. There's no like, oh, here comes the golfer, let's go switch over to the golf mode. For diagnosing the problem, that doesn't change at all. I think the only thing that really changes is if I want to go through, once the injury's done, and now I want to go after that body swing connection, right? I feel like it's important that they know that you know what their swing's like.
Yeah, because I mean, it could be causing the problem, right?
Right.
So, it might have been the reason they're there to begin with.
So literally one of the only things that we would add, starting out is, and you can have somebody in your office do it for you while you're working on the other patient, is I'd put a place where somebody, if possible, somewhere where you could get a video of them hitting a ball. Yeah. If not, you have to ask them to get a video and bring it with them so you can look at this. But imagine like, let's say your friend takes them back and takes their weight, takes their whatever. You have somebody. If one of the things was, I need you to hit a ball, film this, and then Greg's gonna be in a minute, and I have all my data in front of me. How much did that change my productivity? I don't think it changed a lot, but I can sit there and talk about, hey, so Dave sent you in. Dave's your coach, and you guys have been working on that sway. I took a look at it. I know we've been working on this. Hey, it looks to me like it's getting better. What's Dave saying? And you can go and have a communication with them. But it's now they know you're working on their golf swing.
That's right. And I think the other thing is when you have patients, you need to know that they're golfers. Some of them are just coming in for general pain. So you got to make sure you have those questionnaires that give you ideas that they are golfers. And then I think you can almost do a golf performance program in the evening or certain days a week where you could target market to that group and give them
specialty clinics and stuff like that.
Specialty clinics, yeah.
I think they want to make sure that you look at their golf swing. They want to make sure you communicate with their golf coach. And they also, you need to make sure that they're not doing something that you and the coach aren't aware of that's potentially creating the injuries. You see something that you're like, wow, I see a reverse spine angle. Well, now, hey, I see something in your swing. Is it okay if I call Dave, your coach? I need to have a conversation with him real quick just because I think you're talking about your lower back. And your job is to protect. Like, I've got my coach's back. I want to make sure that they're not going to get hurt so they can stop taking lessons, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Looks like we got one that just came in here. So what are some of the strategies to help connect with club professionals?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of connecting with club professionals, you guys remember that we need you more than we realize. So number one is you got to educate us. And that's the hardest thing, is getting in front of a golf professional and educating them. So first thing, find members that are already coming to you that are members of clubs and get an introduction from somebody you know. If you get an introduction from somebody you know, the golf pro is more apt to want to sit down and listen. Second thing I think is you got to have a program to offer. So if you're going to come to me as a golf professional, it might be, hey, listen, I've got a great lower back program that'll keep people playing off longer at your club, which is more rounds, more lessons, and so on. You know, I'd love to do a free talk at your club to your members so that they understand how the body swing connection. So those are just a couple.
Yeah, my thing was, you know, and I lived and read this, right? When I had my practice in DC, I had 83 professionals in the Mid-Atlantic section that I worked with. And it takes a lot of effort, but you need to put the time in to do this. And the way I did it, number one, is I'm telling you, it doesn't take a lot of money to sponsor a local PA section. I used to sponsor the Mid-Atlantic section, and those guys and gals are so appreciative of any help and support you have. I would highly recommend that. They usually let you come in and talk.
So just so you know, the section in every state, there is a PGA section, okay? So you have the Southern California PGA. All of us are members of that, and they often have educational programs. In fact, there's a TPI certified guy up in Orange County that sponsors all the section events. So we have Mondays, there's tournaments and so on. He'll go in there, he sponsors it. His brand is prevalent. He does, you know, he's available for any consultation on their bodies or whatever.
This is going back some years. In Mid-Atlantic, I was like a big sponsor. And back then it was like $5,000. I gave $5,000 for the year. I sponsored the section championship, and I got to come talk at their annual event. And it was, I got to know all the.
You got to know everything.
Yeah, that's good one. Number two is I treat pros for free. I hate to say, I hate the free word, but basically in the Mid-Atlantic, if you had pain, I'm like, you're not out there giving lessons, referring people to me. I need you to get back to work. So if you have any injuries, come in and see me. Now, this was number one, a convenience for the Mid-Atlantic as being a sponsor. But I also felt like they're not going to refer people to you unless they know you, right? I always say to know me is to love me. If Dave doesn't know if I'm good or bad, I'm out of sight, of mind. If I've worked on it, I've helped him. When something comes up, he's like, you got to go see Dr. Rose, man, he helped me a lot. So I feel like they need to know what you can do.
I think one of the things you did so well is you were available. You know, a lot of times I get a member that comes into the pro shop that's complaining of lower back pain, doesn't know where to go. Greg was like, hey, you call me, tell them I'll see them at lunch, the end of the day today. It wasn't like, oh, it's going to take 2 weeks to get an appointment.
That's because I had no life, Dave. But that's
but I mean, those are the little things really you got to do because it really makes me look good.
It really, really is important. By the way, I created referral slips, kind of like, you know, you would refer to get x-rays. I created referral slips to my office, and I used to hand out the referral pads to the golf pros. So they would be like, here, and just here's the problem, and put on there like, I've got lower back pain, shoulder, here's the swing characteristics, they could check it off. And basically I'd say, hey, listen, if you come in with one of those, it's priority. We'll get you in like that day or the next day. And then to me, I feel like not only I want them to get to know me, but I want to know what they do, right? So I'd love to go out there and observe. A lot of times if I start working with people, I'd like, can I come out and watch you teach on the range? Because once I know how you like to drive the car, it's easier for me to build the car.
Not only that, I think, you know, sometimes if you are a golfer yourself, I mean, take lessons, like find golf pros, go to different golf pros, because sometimes it's busy, but to get to the golf pro and make sure you got the right person. At country clubs, you can have 4 or 5 different golf pros. You want to get to the person that's involved with golfers. So the teaching professional, director of instruction might be better than the head golfer.
And then I was a big cold caller. I literally had a map in my office. I had where my office was. I had pins where all the golf professionals were. The pins were orange until I talked to them, and we built a relationship, and they turned green, and my job was to get all the orange pins to green pins. And I would pick 1 or 2 a day that I would call, and I would, like if it was Dave, I'd call him up and I'd say, hey, listen, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name's Dr. Greg Rose. I'm a chiropractor in this area. And I know he's got members all over. I just want him to think about me when he's got a member that lives in this area. And I say, I focus with golfers. If there's any way I can ever help you, let me know. And now he said, and I let him know that I treat Mid-Atlantic professionals when I was in the Mid-Atlantic for free. If he was like, oh, you know what, we've got a chiropractor here at the club. They were good. I would always say, well, that's what I heard. I heard that you work with a fitness person or a medical person, and that's why I'm calling you. It's so hard to find pros that understand the value. You obviously understand the value. So literally, I also would love to know, you know, I've got a lot of patients that live in your area. Can people come take lessons from you, even if they're not members of the club? So now I'm going to go, hey, here's how I can help you. And basically, if the pro's like, yes, we can do lessons, I'd say, I'd love to get some cards because, again, I don't want to send them to a pro that doesn't think the body matters. I know you work with somebody and you have somebody there, so at least you're going to promote this. I'm not worried about this person leaving me. I get that card, and literally, I would send them a couple people. I do this as an experiment. I send them a couple people, and then after 2 or 3 people, I call Dave. I ask him about one of the people I sent. Maybe I remind him about a couple of the other people I sent, and they start to realize that I'm not a threat. And I think that kind of can open up the barriers.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, Eric there. I know you have the golf mechanics track, but are there other educational resources to help me understand and communicate with golf professionals?
That was we just answered Eric's question before.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
sorry.
Pretty
Repeat that.
much.
Follow-up.
Okay, yes, sorry. Brian, how strict are you on fixing all mobility issues before you work on SMCD? Another awesome question. So a lot of people always ask us like, well, you know, they're never going to be able to flex their hip all the way, but we've got half. Should we start doing motor control? Here's the real answer. Remember, when you build motor patterns, right? Once you build a motor pattern, it's there for life, and you can't get rid of it. So the last thing in the world I want to do is build a bad motor pattern. So what you just told me is that I can create a normal pattern to half the range of motion. So if you trust them to do exercises and maintain in their normal range, then you can start working SMCD. If you think they're going to go past the normal range and now they have to compensate, you're building bad motor patterns. So I really feel like it depends on the part of the body, but I tend to think on most people, if mobility is not fixed, I feel like mobility exercises are more important. I think if I give them a mobility routine, things that try and increase the range of motion, they feel better than just working on motor control exercises. That's just my personal opinion, and I try and get the mobility better. But I do understand, like if we just got 30 degrees of rotation and you want to give them some exercises, keep them in that 30 degrees. They go past that 30 degrees, you're potentially building a bad pattern, okay? Real quick, while we're waiting for any other questions, I think we went through our whole list that was pre-submitted. If you guys have any questions, we still have about 13 minutes. You can kind of ask those now. I do want to say Medical 3, we just posted the Medical 3 class. We'll be here at TPI October 25th through 27th. It's always cool if you've never been here to see the homeland. Yep. Which me and Dr. Boyd will be out here, and we can go through and walk you through all the stuff we do. It's 3 days, 25th, 26th, 27th in October. World Golf Fitness Summit, October 12th through the 14th. Always our favorite 3 days every 2 years. For level 2, it's only $99. If you're level 3 by then, it's free.
That's in Orlando, Florida.
Orlando, Florida. And then we have if you enjoyed this and you have other questions or you're still trying to think of your questions, don't worry. We're going to try and do these every quarter at least, unless you guys want more. Just let us know. The next medical Q&A is September 25th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So that's September 25th. And let's see if we got.
I think you have the new SFMA video as part of the online class.
So just in case you haven't gone and looked at the online class in a while and you've been level 2 for a while, remember in January this year we did a massive overhaul of the online class. Please make sure you go in and review the SFMA changes. I actually did a video. I think the first video in there is changes that were made because there was a lot. We've been holding on the changes for like 2 or 3 years and collecting them. We kind of did a complete overhaul. I think the SFMA is way easier now. So a lot of the confusing things are gone. So if you haven't looked at that, please go ahead and do that. Looks like I got a couple more questions here. We got time. I see a ton of people that have tibial internal rotation limitations. Is there an anatomical issue that may have already been in place? Good question. Tibial internal rotation. So to me, tibia is like the necktie. So imagine if you have a tie. If the ankle is a problem or the hip is a problem, it creates rotational problems in the tibia. So I always say, if you have a tibial problem, do you have an ankle problem or hip problem too? If you say, yeah, I got a hip problem too, you don't have a tibia problem, you have a hip problem. If you say, oh, I got an ankle problem, you got an ankle problem, not a tibia problem. If the hip and the ankle are okay, then I work on the tibia. Most common patterns here are, remember, the hip is stuck internally rotated, the tibia responds by externally rotated, hence why medial rotation is a little tighter. And I think sometimes if we can unwind the hip, we can go after the tibia. So that's why I would highly recommend looking at above and below. Is the Comerford hip complex okay to perform with arthritic hips? We talked about this in our fitness class as well too, and absolutely. I always feel like the Comerford hip complex is a exercise that helps activate the glute medius, and the glute medius is the internal and external rotator depending on the position of the hip. And I feel like a lot of times arthritic joints feel better when they start moving. There are some people with arthritis, the more they move the joint, the worse they get, but that's very small, like 5–10%. Yep. Most people actually feel better doing it. So I'm totally cool with that. Let me know, let's see, what's the format for the World Golf Fitness Summit? Lectures, simultaneous, or scheduled one after the other?
World Golf Fitness Summit, obviously we have our keynote presentations like we always do, and then we have breakouts. So we love doing these breakouts where there'll be a golf-specific breakout, a medical-specific breakout, a fitness-specific breakout, and
it's hard to pick.
It's hard to pick, but I think we have 53 speakers this time around. So yeah. We have an incredible group of speakers. We have over 30 exhibitors with all kinds of different products. It's really become one of our favorite events. It's such a great meeting and melting pot.
We also have we have our prime stage in the morning, the breakout rooms in the afternoon, and then we come back and we have prime stage afternoon talks too, but before the social.
Later in the day before the social.
It's
Halloween that week.
We're going Saturday night. We're going to Universal Studios. That's haunted nights there. If you're into haunted houses and scary stuff, I think it's going to be hysterical. We're all going to try and go there. Yep. Okay, what medical qualifications should a golf coach look for when looking for a chiropractor, physio to team up with? So, okay, great question. So, Charles, here's my thing, and this is going to sound horrible. First and foremost is results. Yeah. Qualifications second, results first. Okay, so I'm looking for results. They ask around. People need to feel better. When you send somebody, they better feel better and get better. I don't care if it's a physical therapist, a chiropractor, osteopath. They just need to feel better. Now, a lot of people ask me, what's better, a chiropractor, a physical therapist, an osteopath? My saying is this. If I go into your office as a medical practitioner and I can tell that you're a physical therapist, or I can tell that you're a chiropractor, or I can tell that you're an osteopath, there's an obvious gap in your knowledge. In other words, the best of the best, I can't tell what they are because they do everything, right? So I'm looking for somebody who's got all those skills. Just because you're a physical therapist doesn't mean you can't manipulate. Just because you're a chiropractor doesn't mean you can't do exercise. I feel like all of them should be able to do rehab, manipulation, manual therapy. So I'm looking for manual therapy skills first and foremost. Somebody who's a bulldozer can go in and break those mobility barriers. That'd be the number one. And then obviously somebody who's licensed to work, a healthcare practitioner that's licensed in your country is also, I think, pretty important, right? There are some people that aren't licensed to do it. You don't want anything to do with that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, we probably got time for one or two more. If we got any questions, we always do a little 10-second count here. Just if anybody's got anything, we'll wait 10 more seconds. If not, we'll close it up. Thanks everybody for attending. We really appreciate this. And again, feedback is always very helpful for us as we do more of these. So it looks like we're all good. We'll see you guys for the next Q&A if you've got them in September, and hopefully at the World Golf Fitness Summit. Thanks for chiming in, guys. See you guys.